Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm afraid we're waiting for Paulina Derčmek. I'm sure she'll be here shortly. So I'm going to make my opening remarks first, and then hopefully she won't contradict me when she arrives. That would be slightly unfortunate. Anyway, so we're here to talk about Capital Market Union. This is everyone's familiar with this paper. It's a very green paper. I know it's on yellow paper, but that's what happened to be in my printer rather than green paper. But it really is very green. When you go through it, you'll see an amount of analysis, but the key is the questions. And hopefully that is something which we will be able to add a bit of knowledge today and make sure that we are able to provide some details rather than the time is long past for sort of generalities. In May, the Commission is going to start drafting, and gradually over the next 5 years, things will happen. Now, the fact is, as I've been looking at these things over the last, I suppose 40 years during my time in the city, but certainly the last 20, 25 years doing things in Europe, and certainly the Giovannini group I was on 15 years ago now. As one looks at some of these proposals, the Giovannini barriers, you see that many of them have now been removed. The ones which haven't, notably, are public sector ones. Maybe the tax authorities aren't subject to competition enough. But what happens is, of course, that the private sector wants to do things for its own improvement. The public sector doesn't. So things like withholding tax difficulties, still there, amazingly. And the really interesting one I found was securities law. When I watched Commissioner Hill at his nomination hearings and then read the papers, I saw there's a little sentence there, one short sentence, which says we need to reform securities law, company law, and insolvency law, and a bit of taxation. I thought, this is not 5 years' work, this is 15 years' work. Because to my certain knowledge, this has been going on for a long time. And it's enormously technical. And he's already been able to tick off LTIFs, and we'll talk about those. I'm sure various people will mention that. But the really hard stuff is things like securities law. What is a security? It sounds like an obvious question, but when it comes to what you put into the CCP and what is held by the CSD, etc., the difference in country to country is very substantial. And then insolvency. We can talk about why SMEs in Italy and Spain have to pay 3 or 4% more for their loans than the equivalent German. It's not, QE is not going to solve that. It is about the nuts and bolts of Italian, in that case, Italian judicial system and the insolvency law, the ability to realize the collateral. That's what drives these things. I was giving a speech in somewhere or other, and I said it takes 5 years to collect your collateral in Italy. And a lawyer from the audience shouted out, that's complete nonsense, it's at least 8 years. So that's why people charge extra for a loan. These are matters deeply embedded in national systems. They're not going to go away easily. They're there because the government of years, a century ago, solved some great crisis or financial scandal by enacting laws to make sure it never happens again. So unwinding that and making it the same across the entire European Union is going to be difficult. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be very, very tedious, very technical, very involving the lawyers far more than people like us. But still, it has to be done. In the green paper, SMEs loom large, and we all know that, and we all know why they're growth-enhancing capabilities. But lending or investing in SMEs, lending to them or investing in them, is difficult. There's no two ways about it, and we'll hear later, I'm sure. But the reality is that for the past 40 years, to my certain knowledge, again, people have been looking at ways to invest in SMEs. It's very difficult. The more you get the investment management groups getting bigger and bigger in order to drive down costs, they're less and less willing to lend to a small or lend a small amount to an SME because the cost of monitoring it and doing due diligence is just too high. How do we solve that? The Prospectus Directive There's also a consultation on that and securitization. Prospectus, the key to avoiding fraud. If we simplify it to make it short, quick and understandable to a more average citizen, a more average investor, do we open the door to fraud? The answer traditionally has unfortunately been yes. So we need to guard against that. But how do we keep the cost down? And in the Prospectus Directive consultation, I was fascinated to see the section which says about what are the costs, what are the different costs. And I'm going to be looking very, very carefully at what the accountants say about the cost of the lawyers, and the lawyers say about the cost of the accountants, and country by country as well, and area by area. I think there will be some very revealing, I see people being amused by the idea of the lawyers reporting on the accountants, but we shall see, we shall see. And just to go back to securitization for a moment, these fine words there about doing it and avoiding the bad things that have happened in the past, it's a cultural problem. I come from the city and I see what the fines and penalties have been for the misbehavior of a variety of people in the city. And actually, and it's not just the city, of course, there are people everywhere who do it. And it's this culture of lack of service to society and self-enrichment that has gone. It used not to be the case, but it's gone now. And the question is, what's to be done about it? Very, very difficult. Education, penalties, and so on. But do we wrap everyone up in regulations to the extent that it's almost impossible to understand what's going on? And as you look at all these massive regulations, MiFID and so forth, Solvency II, CRD4, etc., the problems of comprehending it, it's all very well if you've been in the city for many years, you've seen all these things grow. But if I were coming fresh into the financial world from university at the age of 22 or something, and looking at these stacks, well, I suppose they're not stacks of paper anymore, they're very large files, megabytes of files, I would quail at the thought of ever understanding what it's about. So we need to be careful that we haven't lost out. Now, I think what we should do, I'm just looking at the time, we've got a full roster of speakers, so, well, metaphorically speaking. So I think what we should do is carry on, and if Paulina, as and when Paulina arrives, then... Oh, right, sorry. Didn't see you come in. Right. Okay, so in that case, without further ado, what I will say actually is just the procedure. Sorry, I didn't see you come in. I was looking... Right. Yes, so we're going to do this from people being on the platform. Then they'll come up here, and don't bang your heads on this very hard bar here. 7 minutes in principle, 10 minutes absolute maximum. That leaves us half an hour, good half hour for speaking and Q&A, which is what we really want. So as the speakers are speaking, please get ready questions and respond as soon as I ask. Hands up, button on the red button, fingers on the red button to get the microphone. Anyway, without more ado, I will now call on Paulina to come and take the rostrum and tell us the overview of what's in the green paper.